this, the proposed 40th amendment to the Constitution. In relation to the 39th, I didn't speak on that today. I spoke on the last time, and I indicated that I was fully behind that amendment, and I will be voting for that amendment. I have serious concerns in relation to this one, Minister, and I'll start actually in relation to the FLAC concerns that haven't been dealt with. I know we're speaking to a combination of amendments here, all of which seek to make the amendments stronger and to put an obligation on the government to give meaning to their words. And so of all the submissions I've read, and they've all been extremely helpful, I found that FLAC absolutely put the spotlight on their concerns, and none of them have been addressed. Number one, the lack of clarity around the amendments, what they are seeking to achieve and what they will mean in practical terms for law and policy, not answered. Two, the amendments as currently worded will not deliver meaningful enforceable rights and stronger constitutional protection for women, families and carers, as well as other groups who experience discrimination and disadvantage, such as people with disabilities. Instead, they are focused on symbolic recognition alone. Now, I know you're shaking your head, and I'm not going to waste my time trying to unshake your head, but I fully agree that this is a symbolic change that's absolutely empty. The wording, and I'll actually come back and go out on a limb and say I would prefer the existing wording, which is not gender neutral, which is of its time, and I'll give some reasons as to why I would prefer that, because I would have more hope with action under the existing wording in the Constitution than I would have with this. And the third concern of FLAC, the wordings diverge significantly from the recommendations made by the Citizens' Assembly on Gender Equality and the Joint Oireachtas Committee. And indeed, I want to thank the Citizens' Assembly and the Joint Oireachtas Committee for all of their work. By and large, it's been absolutely ignored with this symbolic changing of wording in a constitution that I think is unhelpful. It's already been pointed out that the two things have been conflated or put together, which really shouldn't have happened. The removing of language that's stated, and then the caring put in, and no choice for anybody. So I have serious difficulty promoting this referendum, and I repeatedly classify myself as a very strong feminist, and many other adjectives that I would use. But this is an insult, and it's a double insult to hold it on International Women's Day. I want to thank the library, as usual, for producing their digest. And again, I'm going to give the context and the history, thanks to the library and thanks to my own knowledge and work in the office, but they have succinctly set out the background to the changes. So it's unforgivable that we're here today, and I'm backing the amendments that have been put and striving to make this better when we're really talking about changes that went back, decisions to change this back to 93. So the library has carefully set out for us in 93 the second commission on the status of women. Can you imagine? The second commission on the status of women. It recommended the deletion of Article 41.22. Didn't happen, of course. Then we move forward 6 years, 1996, the Constitutional Review Group recommended deleting the article and replacing it. And I won't go into all the wording because of time constraints, but they actually give wording. And the theme through all of this is they all use shall endeavour. So I'm not sure where strive came out of. 1997, the year my second son was born, first progress report on the all-party Oireachtas Committee on the Constitution recommended deleting the article and replacing it. Fast forward to 2006, a big gap there. The 10th progress report on the All-Party Oireachtas Committee recommended amending Articles 41.21 and 41.22 and again set out why and then give alternative reading. That's 2006. Then we go to 2016, government task force set up, the first option, and they make a number of options and they say it out. And they give out what should go in. putting an obligation on the government doesn't happen, of course. Then in 2018, we get a ministerial announcement, just like that, ministerial announcement, really no backup on it, delete the article, but nothing put forward in relation to its replacement. Now, that is the background to how we're here today. I understand pre-legislative scrutiny was waived, but I'm subject to correction on this. Was it waived pre-legislative scrutiny? Again, it shouldn't have been. I understand the committee agreed to that. I think that was a bad decision. I'm going out on a limb here because that's the place to tease out all of this, to look at the background, look at all the things that were put forward since back in 1993 and come up with some wording. And then I talk today, and in the context of the carers, now we're ostensibly taking out wording that's unacceptable, where we place the woman in the home and we give her a particular role, and all the other parallel developments that happened in the 20th century, the 19th into the 20th century, when we had the whole architecture of containment. And we've spoken about that many times. And so that didn't have to happen, of course. A different interpretation could have been taken of that very narrow wording in the Constitution, and I might get a chance to come back to that. And so we look at family carers, and they've been mentioned many times today, and again, I want to thank them for their work. And they have a progress report on what's happened in relation to government action from the Plan for Government, and they have 18 commitments, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this, Minister, and they're very good, they're very positive, and they give you 3 where you've received a good progress report. And let me absolutely back that up, particularly in relation to the Minister Humphrey's announcement for pensions for carers and other matters, and they clearly highlight that. That's 3 out of 18. Of the other 15, 4 received regressive, going backwards. 6 received no score, and 5 received limited progress. That's the progress, that's outlined by the family carers, as well as giving us all the details in relation to the facts and figures. And those facts have been quoted here today, and we have 299, almost 300,000, and that's a conservative figure in relation to carers' unpaid leave. I understand that other figures put that much higher, nearly at 500,000, 500,000 unpaid. And what does the OECD tell us? They tell us that if we look at unpaid, and we look at care and what it does for society, for states, for us all, given even the basic hourly minimum wage, the OECD has told us it would amount to 9% of the global gross domestic product. 9%, at a very, very low valuation of the value put on caring and the numbers. Now, you would think, Minister, at this point, after COVID, and the transformative change that we need in this society, that we would be absolutely recognising the invaluable work of carers in our society, putting a value on it and putting an obligation on the state to deliver on that obligation. Where is that transformative change? An empty symbolic gesture is going to go in without any obligation whatsoever on you. And we have women's organisations absolutely trying their best to be positive, because we have so little expectation from different governments that the women's organisations that have fought gallantly to bring equality are saying this is good, but. And we have TDs, and I understand where they're coming from, saying yes, and let's lay out the stall. This is the time to lay out the stall or not change the Constitution. And that's not what's happening here, and we're going backwards. And if I look at the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, and they gave their report in July 22, and it's well worth reading that report because they put context to care and value on it. Despite the immense value of care, it has been conceptualised by the Irish state as a commercial product, undervalued, unrecognised, and often low paid or not paid at all. direct quote from Kathleen Lynch, Emeritus Professor. She's done marvellous work on the commercialisation and the privatisation of care, and she's highlighted, amongst other writers, the difficulties and the consequences of that. And we've seen it lately in relation to nursing homes and the report by the ESRI, who now tell us over 80-something%. We needed the ESRI to tell us what we have been saying here for years. Please stop privatising the care profession. And now the nursing homes are almost 40 to 50% reliant on money coming from equity funds. And when we have the next recession, bang go our nursing homes. And the exact same thing with care, the privatisation of care over and over. And what do they define as a product is it's removed from its relational nature and institutionalised commercial norms. Seeking to make a profit from care is antithetical to its values. The impact of the current flawed system is stark, with the growing crisis, Minister, a growing crisis in the care sector, resulting in negative outcomes across society. And they go on to say, in order to ensure social and political justice, public policy making must be grounded in ethics and the value of care, and prioritise human rights-based solutions. Because we saw during COVID what happened when human rights solutions weren't prioritised. We saw the direct consequences of the privatisation of the care of the elderly. And we see it on a daily basis with people struggling to care for loved ones who are on the spectrum of disability. Struggling and being met by government responses. We provide millions of home care hours, and we know on the ground that they're struggling and up all night. And we have insulting language from a Taoiseach that talks about being there for the people who get up early in the morning, when some people don't even get to bed because they're caring for nothing or next to nothing. This was a golden opportunity to change that. This was a golden opportunity to say the privatisation, the commercialisation of care is not in the interest of our economy. It was time to value that and bring in the transformative change. And that hasn't happened. They clearly point out, and they're taking this from a lot of writers, market-driven solutions can no longer provide the answer. And yet, the care sector in Ireland has become increasingly privatised and commercialised, with state resources being directed for profit companies to help them make a profit. And they go on to make many recommendations which are not, well, they are relevant, but I won't go into them here. So I'll go back to the wording that's in the Constitution. And I'll just finish by just looking at that for a little while. And I actually agree, you might find it surprising, with the amendments being brought, or certainly the tenor of in relation to the rural independence and Deputy McGrath and his colleagues. And why do I say that? Because the existing Constitution tells us that the mother should not be obliged to work outside of the home because of economic necessity. Now, certainly the wording needs to be changed. And the consequences of what happened, of just zoning in on a woman, and the parallel developments in Irish society by a male-dominated patriarchal society, was totally unacceptable. But the concept behind, which for me is the kernel of what this debate should be about, and it hasn't been mentioned, no carer should be forced, whether they're a mother, a father, or whatever category they're working in as the primary carer in a house, should be forced out through economic necessity to have a different job or an additional job. That was the kernel of this article that you're now changing in a very, I would say, pathetic manner, without recognising, perhaps, that there was huge scope within that article, as the judges have pointed out, as Susan Denham did over 23 years ago in a dissenting judgment, that that article, where the woman was in the home and that was given recognition in the Constitution, was doing something valuable, but could be interpreted in a modern-day concept, not just to apply to a woman, but put an actual value. And she's not the only judge that has actually referred to this. Hers was a dissenting judgment. Other judges have expressed surprise that the existing article has really never been tested. So given a choice of what you're putting in now in this referendum and what's there, I would take my choices with what's there and leave it to the judiciary in an appropriate case to interpret that in a modern capacity that doesn't limit it to a mother, but absolutely recognises the value of care, without which a society cannot function, without which the economy cannot function. That's what the debate should be about. That's what the debate should have been at pre-legislative scrutiny. And I am now left with a decision to make, which I've almost made, unfortunately, but I'd strive to keep an open mind. The existing article is stronger to me in terms of the possible interpretation by the courts, if it was tested, than what you're putting in, which has taken away any obligation on you to do something. You've gone away from the Citizens' Assembly, the Joint Oireachtas Committee. You've simply ignored it, and you've put this in, and to me, it's absolutely unacceptable. Your Maga.